From Fairfax, Virginia, this is Out of the Past with Chuck Langdon and Lee Shephard, an in-depth discussion with some of the most fascinating people of our time, many of them with strong area connections. Now, today's Out of the Past.
Welcome to Out of the Past. I'm Chuck Langdon with co-host Lee Shephard. Lee, who do we have as a guest?
Well, Chuck, I've been practicing my How Now Brown Cows and Do Re Mi's this morning. In honor of our guest, we have with us two longtime outstanding personalities, both vocalists, but in a different field. One is a broadcaster and the other is a singer, and they just happen to be married to each other. We're honored to have as our guest CBS producer and longtime announcer for Face the Nation, and a singer, writer, dancer, teacher, marketing expert, who is also a wife and mother, and they're married to each other. Welcome, John and Donna Wilcox.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Now, John, you were born in Decatur, Illinois. Donna, you're from Colorado. And perhaps we should begin with a map of how you two happened to get together.
Well, we were both in Colorado. That's how that happened. I was working there, and one afternoon I went to a movie, and before the movie began, an old friend of mine walked in. He said, "Hey, I want to sit down with you." And I said, "Okay, that's great." He said, "Well, I'm going to go get some popcorn." So we went out, and he comes back with the popcorn, and he comes back with this lovely lady, too. And he introduced her to me, and I said, "Oh, it's nice to meet you." And we watched the movie, and
that was the end of that.
That was the end of that.
And you never saw each other again?
Never again. She did show up and ask about a job.
Yes. One of the other singers at CU had been the record librarian at KBOL, which is where he was program director. And she was going to leave, and so I thought, yeah, I'd love to do that. So I went in and applied for the job, the record librarian, and of course re-met him. Actually, I knew who he was anyway, because I had come to Boulder a year before any of this happened to visit a friend who was at CU, and I heard the radio that night, and I heard a jazz show, and I thought, what is this guy doing in Boulder, for crying out loud? He was so good. So,
Did he know that you were the person who was showing up for this interview?
no, he didn't know I was coming in for an interview. I just went in the door. I mean,
Very brassy walk.
this is a small station, you know. I had a screen door.
But this is after you'd been to the movies, but you didn't.
Yep.
No, he said he wrote my name down on his telephone book, but he never called me.
Mm-hmm. And so when you asked him if you could have a job, he said, "You're hired, and then will you marry me?"
Not quite.
Close, but not quite. I hired her and put her in the record library, where she did an excellent job, as a matter of fact. She was singing regularly on weekends, especially.
Well, and we did the Curtsy Melody time.
Oh, that's right. That was.
We did a 15-minute 2 times a week, once in the studio, once in the appliance store, which was what Curtsy appliance store was. They were the sponsors, and we did a 15-minute live music, and of course John did the announcing, and I did some singing.
No, I love small stations like that.
Oh, it was fun.
I really do now, especially since I'm no longer working in one. But you actually hit the big time, Donna, before he did. And, of course, big time being the announcer for Face the Nation every week is pretty big.
From CBS News in Washington, Face the Nation, with CBS News Chief Washington Correspondent Bob Shephard. And now, from Washington, here is Bob Shephard.
And good morning again. We begin with some late news.
You hit the big time even before.
Well, the big time,
In a New York advertising agency, you sang jingles?
But that came later.
Bubble Up has pizzazz. Pizzazz. That's what Bubble Up has. You can see it, taste it, you can feel it. Bubble Up has it. Pizzazz. There's a kiss of lemon and a kiss of lime. Take a drinkin' every time. Bubble Up has pizzazz. Pizzazz. That's what Bubble Up has.
That came later. However, as far as I was concerned, I hit the big time because there were so many good musicians in Boulder at that time. And Dave Grusin is one of them. And of course, Dave is very famous now. But that's how I happened to do the jingle. He we were in New York, and he knew I was there, and he was doing the jingle. He'd made the arrangement and so forth. So that's how I did happen to do the jingle. But he made the big time.
I think
he happened to know me.
Didn't some others in that band also make the big time?
Yeah.
Oh, yes. Well, in the Colorado University band, Spike Robinson, who was an aeronautical engineer and worked at Cape Canaveral, had played when he was in the service in England, and then gave it up to go to college, and he went to work in the space agency. And he did that and then took early retirement and went back to playing. He made probably 15 or 20 albums with all the famous jazz people.
He lived in England the last probably 12 years of his life and worked constantly, and wonderful, wonderful jazz player.
And a very funny guy.
And very funny.
And Dave Grusin was in the band. One Academy Award, how many nominations? A lot. Emmys, Grammys, you name it. And he's been a friend for all these years. There was a singer in the group, Bob Eaton, and Bob went to New York, got hired in the Ray Charles Singers, recorded with them, was on the Perry Como show, and did.
And actually, he's the one, he knew Andy Williams, and he introduced Dave to Andy Williams,
That's right.
and that's how Dave got his first job with accompanying Andy Williams for a summer replacement television show. It does matter who you know.
Yeah,
It didn't hurt.
John, how did you get into broadcasting? When did you start?
I was going around visiting several schools with one of my football playing buddies. We've been offered scholarships, and Colorado came up on the list. And my one caveat was that I wanted to get a job part-time in broadcasting. And a very nice man at KBOL acceded to those wishes, and that's how I got there.
Now, I saw on your resume you were a spectacular football player.
Spectacular, maybe a
Well,
little
if you
bit.
were given a college scholarship, you were
30 pounds lighter and 95% more agile in those days.
But you know, you didn't wear face masks during those days. How did you keep
we
all
wore
your
funny plastic helmets.
How did you keep all your teeth?
Just lucky. I used to play with a guy who, when they tackled him, bit the opposing players, but I never had that happen.
Goodness.
No, I did that for a year and a half, and then I decided it was more fun being in the broadcast booth doing color on broadcasts, and that's what I did. I quit the sports and did that in addition to doing my regular stuff at KBOL. It was a pretty long weekend while you're still carrying a full load of scholastic work, but it was fun. I enjoyed it. I was young and stupid and didn't know any better. When I started at KBOL in 1949, I want you to know the huge salary that I was getting paid so you can understand the attraction of the business. 65 cents an hour. How's that grab you?
Well, I was one of the well-paid guys. I made 75.
Oh, okay. Well, we got a boost somewhere along the line, but it took a year or two.
John, how many people told you have a great voice for broadcasting?
Never in all the years that I was doing radio and television. I never had anybody do that. In the last 5 or 6 years, for some reason, people just, in a store or in a restaurant, people say, gee, you have a lovely voice. Do you ever think about going? And no, I never thought about that. And I can't explain that. I don't know why that happened.
Well, that's unusual, because when I first came to Washington in '65, I listened to who all was on the air to compare, hey, who am I going to be competing with, or what the other station sounds like. And I don't tell you this because you're a guest on our show, but I'll tell you this because it's true. I immediately decided your voice was the best one on the air in Washington. Ooh. This is 1965. The best radio voice. It really sparkled. And from now on, I'm going to ask real tough questions.
Oh, I was just going to say, why didn't you come to me then? I could have used an agent.
In memorials of marble and in monuments of stone, there's the constant shining spirit of the greatness we have known. That's why we like to be in Washington, D.C.
But speaking of MAL, that was your first big-time radio job, wasn't it, or not?
KLZ in Denver was where I worked after Boulder, and before I came to Washington. I was a 5,000-watt CBS affiliate, too. I mean, it was a very good station. We had some top-notch people there. But it's not, Denver is not the market that Washington is.
Yeah.
So what your explanation is probably correct.
Now, didn't you and Donna do a travel show together? Weren't you into the travel writing, Donna?
Mm-hmm. We did. We recorded some things. We tried to get some sponsors interested and so forth, and it was not, never was a completed deal. But it did lead to us going to England in 1969 to live for 18 months while we researched a book on travel.
Which everybody loved, but nobody bought, incidentally.
Oh.
That was great
I
fun.
still have it in case you're interested.
Well, I think nowadays, if I went that route and were talented in that field, I would just self-publish.
Probably, yes. It was a whole different scheme at that time.
Oh, I know it was. I know.
You couldn't really
I don't
do
think you could do that sort of
self-publishing
thing
the way you can now.
Exactly.
But yeah, it was wonderful. I would not give up those times for anything, even though it wasn't, didn't work.
How did you get to CBS?
I drove.
Well, you went to WRC.
Oh, that's right. I forgot about the the ill-fated time at WRC. That was awful. I got there at the time when the station was not doing well, and then shortly did even worse. And they fired everybody on the air, with the exception of the people who were station employee contracts. That's Mac McGarry and Willard Scott, of course, and Paul Anthony. But the rest of us got shown the door. But what they didn't know was they had these funny contracts that were renewable like every 24 hours or something. And I had, the manager had signed it, and I had signed it and turned it into the union, but I had not given it back to the station. So when they came and said, well, we're going to give you an hour and a half pension or something, and I said, oh, well, I have this contract here. So in effect, they bought our first house for us. They made a nice down payment. I've always been appreciative of them for that. And after that, Don Gaynor at the after office called and said, have you talked to people at CBS? They called and were talking about you and some other people. And I said, okay, I'll get out. So I talked and went down and got the job.
What were your duties at CBS?
Oh, dear. Everything short of sweeping out. We did some billing, so that I had a partner, Kim Gregory. And we did all kinds of stuff. We produced the in-house stuff for the NFL games. We did a lot of college games where we did the commercials and got the setup here. And I don't know.
What were the 5-minute football segments? What were they about?
No, not
Football.
Those were 5-minute shows that CBS had instituted. And,
radio.
Yeah, radio. Oh. And they were various correspondents. Dan Rather did one. Susan Spencer did one, and I don't know who. There were 8 of them all together. And they had a topic: energy, the news, the White House, whatever. And all I did was the open and close, and if there was a live commercial, I did that. And that was terrific. We did those for about, 4 years.
Something like that.
And then came the big cutback. And the shows went, some of the people went, I'm sorry to say. And so that disappeared. But that's broadcasting business.
That's not unusual.
No, things come and things go.
But they used to fire me every Friday afternoon on one of those stations.
Well, you got hired back on Monday, didn't you?
But you actually, back in our time, now I don't know if it's a big deal now, but back, we grew up with radio. And to have your voice go nationwide, and especially on CBS, that was just the ultimate for any kid who wanted to be a radio announcer. And John, what a thrill it must have been for you.
It is interesting because when I worked in Denver, it was a CBS affiliate. So I heard all those people. And since I was on in the morning, I had Dallas Townsend doing the early morning news. And I always loved it because at least once every other week, he broke up at the end of the show. And I have some of those recordings of Dallas going sky high, and the poor announcer would come in and try to pick it up, and then he went too. So, yeah, I heard those people, but I guess you don't really think too much about that. I mean, they're flesh and blood, and some of them you liked, and some of them you got along with, but they were not close friends.
Well, and tell them about your voice going out. I mean, you were on David Letterman 3 times.
Yes, I was. And I'll tell you how that happened. I had a terrible cold, worse than the one my wife has now. But I soldiered on. They said, oh, come on, you can do the show. And so I'm there at the end of the show. And I'm doing the close. And I can feel my throat's going to grab up. So I reached over and pushed the cough button. Everybody in radio and television knows what that is. And I went, and I heard it echoing all through the building. Somebody had cut off the cough switch. So somewhere Letterman got that, and he played it not once, but 3 times.
Oh, my gosh.
I sent him a letter asking him when he was going to pay me for this, but I never heard anything.
He said this is, I think he said this is illustrative of the CBS, what did he call it, expertise or something, something like that. You know, I mean, he was kind of
Well, you know, it could have been much worse. There were fellows who pushed the cough button, and it wasn't working.
And they swore.
And they certainly did.
I didn't have the strength to swear that day.
And then there's another story that John tells where the fella came in for an audition. I think this was at KBOL. And John was in the booth, and the guy is talking. But nothing's coming in. Nothing's coming in. Then he goes, and he hears that. He comes in. He's pushing the cough button when he talks and letting it up when he clears his throat.
Oh, goodness. Well, I know when we announcers used to get together, we'd say, who was the first person to ever say blank blank on the air? And we all knew. But may that be as it is, or what am I trying to say?
That may be as it is.
Say goodnight, Gracie.
You know, wonderful reminiscing.
I've been in this business too long, haven't I?
Well, John, speaking of that, how long were you at CBS?
Well, I started in 1972, still there, so that's 36 years.
36 years.
Something like that.
Seems like only 35, but...
Now, enough of this announcer stuff. I want to get to Donna. You
Please
also were a dancer, weren't you?
Well, yes. Actually, I was a dancer. I tap danced when I was really little. And then...
She was on stage in Denver at 3.
Yeah, yeah. Loved tap dancing, always have. When I went to Lindsborg, Kansas, to Bethany College, I went 1 semester, but I'd been taking tap dancing, quote, lessons from a woman that came there. She was going to join the WACs, and they needed another teacher. So I quit college and went to teach tap dancing, and then that's where I first sang with the band. In fact, that's why I went, because when the fellow who ran the dance studio hired me, he said, I can also get you a chance to have Gene Fullen listen to you. And so I said, yeah, okay, I'll do that. So that was the first time I had sung with the band, too. The dancing that you're thinking of was aerobic dancing, and I didn't start that until I was 42. I had put on weight, and I thought, gee, I'll either just make myself a whole bunch of tent dresses, you know, and ignore it, or I'll try to lose weight. And I finally decided I'd feel better if I tried to lose weight. And I got into an aerobic dance class, and then it was something I loved doing, so I became an instructor, and I did that for 20 years.
Well, you certainly don't have a weight problem now.
Me either.
No, John.
No, I don't have a problem. I have some, like everybody else, I'd like to rearrange it, but no, but I love dancing. I really love dancing it just about as much as I do singing.
Is that right?
Just, oh, yeah.
My 4-year-old granddaughter is also a tap dancer.
Yeah.
What's her name?
Sydney.
And she likes to talk to her grandmother and see what's happening in the tap dancing thing. We now have the video cams on our computer. So whenever Sydney is awake and going, Grandma has to get up and show her some steps.
They came and visited, and boy, I mean, we just tap danced up a storm.
Well, you know, Sydney can actually watch us talking about her.
Yes, yes.
That's true.
Let's do that.
that'd
Sydney,
be fun.
are you watching? How are you, sweetheart? You are beautiful.
When's my
It is
check
beautiful.
come?
You have a son.
That was her first
Yes.
appearance on television.
That's right.
Our son Chris went to the University of Arizona, got a degree in geography, and then on the day that he graduated said, yeah, but I think I want to go into radio. No. But that's where he is. He's now doing the morning show. He and a partner, Woody, do the morning show in Anchorage.
Broadcasting from the third floor of the Diamond Center, high above the beautiful Walmart parking lot, it's Woody and Wilcox on 100.5 The Fox.
It is Woody and Wilcox here on the Fox.
For goodness sakes.
So they're a long way away, which is not fun. They're too far away. But they came to visit in September, and they were here for a while, and that helped. And we go visit there, of course.
Oh, yes.
And John, you couldn't discourage him from doing this?
We try.
You can't
I
get
did my
that out of
best.
someone's blood. It's in his
tried.
blood, probably.
He likes
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
He likes it.
But
mean,
now I
it's,
got to. We're talking about. It's always nice to know somebody. Donna knew the fellow that ran actually 4 or 5 stations.
oh, yeah, he owned
And he
a
was
bunch.
in. They were in Tucson, and so she called. Well, I actually called her wife, his wife, and then talked to Dennis, and he said, "Yeah, I think we probably will." It turned
I
out
said, this guy's never had any experience. He just wants to get on radio. You know, if you have someplace where he could train and get some, some background. He said, oh, he doesn't have to do that. He said, we just opened a new station here in Tucson. He said, we need people. Have him come in and audition. So
Well,
that's what
Johnny
he
and I
did.
both have degrees from radio school. A little joke for you there, Johnny.
Yes.
that's Hard Knocks. Is that
They didn't have radio schools back when we came
No.
along.
No. Well,
They hired people off the streets, and
Yeah.
and
Oh,
here we
it's-
are.
Speaking of hired off the street, were you going to tell him about your audition when you were program director for the people who came in off the
Oh,
street?
well, when you got to be program director, I didn't realize.
It's a
this.
small station.
It's just people sort of wander in off the street and figure that this looks like a good, lively occupation. And one guy I remember him very, but this apart from the guy who pushed the cough button, this guy came in and says, I thought about being on the radio. Can you use? And I said, well, we'll do an audition here. Oh, it was absolutely dreadful. We're in the control room, doubled up with laughter. It was cruel and unkind, but it was funny. And I said, well, I don't think we can handle it. He says, oh, well, could you talk to the guy at the big station down in Denver and give him my name? And I said, oh, yeah, I'll do that. The big station, I don't know what that was to begin with, but it prompted us to say, we need to have an audition for these folks. Herewith the audition, with
Just a few lines.
every tough word you can put in there and every, what can I say?
Just a few lines in the title.
Colorado Governor Stephen L. R. McNichols issued a manifesto today from his vacation headquarters at Paonia, south of Telluride. While there were variegated facets to the gubernatorial proclamation, the paramount point emphasized, you can get that right off, and you had to, the counties he specified for certain sagacious salvage work were Archuleta, Costilla, Huerfano, Otero, and Saguache.
You know, the only word in there I recognized was goober.
Well, it was wonderful to hear him go through this.
It was wonderful to be in a small station.
Yes,
it was
it
great
was.
fun. 3 minutes.
We laughed a lot. One story, my good friend Fred Hobbs, who's been a broadcaster all his life, was just put into the Colorado Broadcasting Hall of Fame. And when the big boss was gone, Fred got the challenge to do the 8 o'clock morning news, and Jack White, who was the DJ, did the commercials. And what happened was we were very arrogant about this. You never read copy before you went on the air. I mean, that was a childish thing to do. If it was a newscast, you just ripped it off the wire and took it in and you read it. And the guy who did the commercials just, well, turn the page, this is what we're going to. So anyway, Fred is doing the newscast. This was during the Korean War, and the North Koreans had made some films, fake films, of American soldiers surrendering. And so the story went, the American soldiers came running down the hill, throwing down their loaded cigars. Rifles. Jack White, take it. Jack comes on. Well, Fred, we don't have any loaded cigars at Hollister Motor Company. And then they both went, and for 10 minutes they laughed and laughed and laughed.
You know, Lee, I've made an observation. Donna is an agent for her son and for John, and she's also a director because, have you noticed, she's been giving him time. She told him he had 2 minutes and he's off of the air. But I think we have some time left, but
Okay.
I did notice that.
Yes, well, I
play
knew
a-
he wasn't looking.
Well, I still think my wife has a little edge there. She tells me all the time, don't miss an opportunity to shut up. Wives are taught that in wife school, right?
I'll tell you one other story. Actually, I don't.
1 minute.
Oh, debt of thought, debt of thanks to KLZ because they got me into television. And one day after I'd finished my show at 10 o'clock, the radio show, they said, Bob Boots is sick. We got to have somebody do the news. Come on down and do it. And I said, I'm not a newsman. I can't do the news. So, well, we'll get somebody to help you. So we got the thing. It was a 15-minute show, 10 minutes and 5 minutes of weather. So I got through the news okay, and then went to a commercial. You came back, and I had to go over to the map with the pen and do this thing. So I started writing, and it wouldn't write. And I went, bump! And the ink just ran down all across the map. And I said, well, I don't think the temperature is going to drop that low. Goodbye.
Well, John, we're out of time, and since you want to take us off the air, just tell them thank you for watching Out of the Past into that camera.
Thank you. Thank you. We had a wonderful time. Hope you did too.
Thanks
We'll
for
have to have
watching.
them, guys. We'll have to have them back, you guys.
Thank you for
Yes.
inviting us.
Thank you.
Thank you for inviting us.
I had some more material.
Washington, D.C. WRC.
20 minutes after 12 o'clock.
Yeah!
Johnny Wilcox with you here on WRC, 72 degrees this afternoon. I can hardly wait until the big hit opera, which has swept all the opera fans in Peking, gets to the Western world. The title of the new opera there that's such a big success is called Song of the Dragon River. Probably full of toe-tapping tunes, wouldn't you imagine? But the big show-stopping ballet, the one that has them all standing up and cheering, is, are you ready for this, titled Spreading Fertilizer. That's, would I kid you about something as serious as that? Listen, I've seen some things on Broadway that smelled a little stronger than that.
WRC 980.